Welcome to Games from Folktales, a podcast that mixes historical research and tabletop role-playing settings. I'm your host, Timothy Ferguson, and this week we start a new series of episodes upon the life of Benvenuto Cellini. I have done one of them previously, however, this one is drawing from his autobiography. Cellini is of interest to us if we're Ars Magica players because he is almost certainly a Verditus Magus. This episode is based on the first 50 chapters of his autobiography. It contains the miraculous sort of events which often seem to happen early in the lives of magi to mark them as suitable to become apprentices. It shows some of his early masterpieces. He wanders for a time in a potential Covenant site and talks about the resources to be found there. He interacts with another magician who makes his fortune by using moon duration healing spells and getting out of town before they wear off. The following recordings were released into the public domain by LibriVox. They have a multitude of readers, proof listeners, and book coordinators, and I would like to thank them all.
Andrea Cellini was yet alive when I was about 3 years old, and he had passed his 100th. One day they had been altering a certain conduit pertaining to a cistern, and there issued from it a great scorpion, unperceived by them, which crept down from the cistern to the ground, and slank away beneath a bench. I saw it, and ran up to it, and laid my hands upon it. It was so big that when I had it in my little hands, it put out its tail on one side, and on the other thrust forth both its mouths.
As a clarification, those mouths are the pincers of the scorpion. It is clearly mouths in the original Italian, however.
They relate that I ran in high joy to my grandfather, crying out, "Look, grandpapa, at my pretty little crab!" When he recognized that the creature was a scorpion, he was on the point of falling dead for the great fear he had and anxiety about me. He coaxed and entreated me to give it him, but the more he begged, the tighter I clasped it, crying and saying I would not give it to any one. My father, who was also in the house, ran up when he heard my screams, and in his stupefaction could not think how to prevent the venomous animal from killing me. Just then his eyes chanced to fall upon a pair of scissors, and so, while soothing and caressing me, he cut its tail and mouth off. Afterwards, when the great peril had been thus averted, he took the occurrence for a good augury. When I was about 5 years old, my father happened to be in a basement chamber of our house, where they had been washing, and where a good fire of oak logs was still burning. He had a viol in his hand, and was playing and singing alone beside the fire. The weather was very cold. Happening to look into the fire, he spied in the middle of those most burning flames a little creature like a lizard, which was sporting in the core of the intensest coals. Becoming instantly aware of what the thing was, he had my sister and me called, and pointing it out to us children, gave me a great box on the ears, which caused me to howl and weep with all my might. Then he pacified me good humouredly and spoke as follows: "My dear little boy, I am not striking you for any wrong that you have done, but only to make you remember that lizard which you see in the fire is a salamander, a creature which has never been seen before by any one of whom we have credible information." So saying, he kissed me and gave me some pieces of money.
Now let's skip forward about 19 years.
At that time, while I was still a young man of about 23, there raged a plague of such extraordinary violence that many thousands died of it every day in Rome. Somewhat terrified at this calamity, I began to take certain amusements, as my mind suggested, and for a reason which I will presently relate. I had formed a habit of going on feast days to the ancient buildings, and copying parts of them in wax or with the pencil; and since these buildings are all ruins, and the ruins house innumerable pigeons, it came into my head to use my gun against these birds. So then, avoiding all commerce with people, in my terror of the plague, I used to put a fowling piece on my boy Pagalino's shoulder, and he and I went out alone into the ruins, and oftentimes we came home laden with a cargo of the fattest pigeons. I did not care to charge my gun with more than a single ball, and thus it was by pure skill in the art that I filled such heavy bags. I had a fowling piece which I had made myself; inside and out it was as bright as any mirror. I also used to make a very fine sort of powder, in doing which I discovered secret processes beyond any which have yet been found; and on this point, in order to be brief, I will give but one particular, which will astonish good shots of every degree. This is, that when I charged my gun with powder weighing 1/5 of the ball, it carried 200 paces point blank.
So remember that. He charged with a single ball, not with shot. He made his own gun. It's better than yours. He made his own powder. It's better than yours. He's a great shot. He's better than you are. And his boy, his friend, who he has a extensive relationship with at a later time, is also far more attractive than any other person that you have ever met. Oh, and he has more pigeons than you. As you can see, Cellini has that flaw that all Verditus Magi have, that they must be the best at everything, but particularly their work.
It is true that the great delight I took in this exercise bid fair to withdraw me from my art and studies, yet in another way it gave me more than it deprived me of, seeing that each time I went out shooting I returned with greatly better health, because the open air was a benefit to my constitution. My natural temperament was melancholy, and while I was taking these amusements my heart leapt up with joy, and I found that I could work better, and with far greater mastery than when I spent my whole time in study and manual labour. In this way, my gun, at the end of the game, stood me more in profit than in loss. It was also the cause of my making acquaintance with certain hunters after curiosities, who followed in the track of those Lombard peasants who used to come to Rome to till the vineyards at the proper season. While digging the ground, they frequently turned up antique medals, agates, chrysoprases, cornelians and cameos, also sometimes jewels, as for instance emeralds, sapphires, diamonds, and rubies. The peasants used to sell things of this sort to the traders for a mere trifle, and I very often, when I met them, paid the latter several times as many golden crowns as they had given Giulio's for some object. Independently of the profit I made by this traffic, which was at least tenfold, it brought me also into agreeable relations with nearly all the cardinals of Rome. I will only touch upon a few of the most notable and the rarest of these curiosities. There came into my hands, among many other fragments, the head of a dolphin about as big as a good-sized ballot bean. Not only was the style of this head extremely beautiful, but nature had here far surpassed art, for the stone was an emerald of such good colour that the man who bought it from me for tens of crowns sold it again for hundreds after setting it as a finger ring. I will mention another kind of gem. This was a magnificent topaz, and here art equalled nature. It was as large as a big hazelnut, with the head of Minerva in a style of inconceivable beauty. I remember yet another precious stone, different from these. It was a cameo engraved with Hercules binding Cerberus of the triple throat. Such was its beauty and the skill of its workmanship that our great Michelagnolo protested he had never seen anything so wonderful. Among many bronze medals, I obtained one upon which was a head of Jupiter. It was the largest that had ever been seen, the head of the most perfect execution, and it had on the reverse side a very fine design of some little figures in the same style. I might enlarge at great length on this curiosity, but I will refrain, for fear of being prolix. 28. As I have said above, the plague had broken out in Rome. But though I must return a little way upon my steps, I shall not therefore abandon the main path of my history. There arrived in Rome a surgeon of the highest renown, who was called Maestro Giacomo da Carpi. This able man, in the course of his other practice, undertook the most desperate cases of the so-called French disease. In Rome this kind of illness is very partial to the priests, and especially to the richest of them. When, therefore, Maestro Giacomo had made his talents known, he professed to work miracles in the treatment of such cases by means of certain fumigations, but he only undertook a cure after stipulating for his fees, which he reckoned not by tens, but by hundreds of crowns. He was a great connoisseur in the arts of design. Chancing to pass one day before my shop, he saw a lot of drawings which I had laid upon the counter, and among these were several designs for little vases in a capricious style, which I had sketched for my amusement. These vases were in quite a different fashion from any which had been seen up to that date. He was anxious that I should finish one or two of them for him in silver, and this I did with the fullest satisfaction, seeing they exactly suited my own fancy. The clever surgeon paid me very well, and yet the honour which the vases brought me was worth 100 times as much, for the best craftsmen in the goldsmith's trade declared they had never seen anything more beautiful or better executed. No sooner had I finished them than he showed them to the Pope, and the next day following he betook himself away from Rome. He was a man of much learning, who used to discourse wonderfully about medicine. The Pope would fain have had him in his service, but he replied that he would not take service with anybody in the world, and that whoso had need of him might come to seek him out. He was a person of great sagacity, and did wisely to get out of Rome, for not many months afterwards all the patients he had treated grew so ill that they were 100 times worse off than before he came. He would certainly have been murdered if he had stopped. He showed my little vases to several persons of quality, amongst others to the most excellent Duke of Ferrara, and pretended that he had got them from a great lord in Rome, by telling this nobleman that if he wanted to be cured he must give him those 2 vases, and that the lord had answered that they were antique, and besought him to ask for anything else which it might be convenient for him to give, provided only he would leave him those. But according to his own account, Maestro Giacomo made as though he would not undertake the cure, and so he got them. I was told this by Messer Alberto Bendedio in Ferrara, who with great ostentation showed me some earthenware copies he possessed of them. Thereupon I laughed, and as I said nothing, Messer Alberto Bendedio, who was a haughty man, flew into a rage and said, "You are laughing at them, are you? And I tell you that during the last 1000 years there has not been born a man capable of so much as copying them." I then, not caring to deprive them of so eminent a reputation, kept silence, and admired them with mute stupefaction. It was said to me in Rome by many great lords, some of whom were my friends, that the work of which I had been speaking was, in their opinion, of marvellous excellence and genuine antiquity; whereupon, emboldened by their praises, I revealed that I had made them. As they would not believe it, and as I wished to prove that I had spoken truth, I was obliged to bring evidence and to make new drawings of the vases, for my word alone was not enough, inasmuch as Maestro Giacomo had cunningly insisted upon carrying off the old drawings with him. By this little job I earned a fair amount of money.
Let us skip forward another few years.
On the entreaty of my brother and sister, I remained at Florence, though my own inclination led me to return to Rome. The dear friend also, who had helped me in some of my earlier troubles, as I have narrated, I mean Piero, son of Giovanni Landi, he too advised me to make some stay in Florence, for the Medici were in exile, that is to say, Signor Ippolito and Signor Alessandro, who were afterwards respectively Cardinal and Duke of Florence, and he judged it would be well for me to wait and see what happened. At that time there arrived in Florence a Sienese, called Girolamo Meredi, who had lived long in Turkey and was a man of lively intellect. He came to my shop, and commissioned me to make a golden medal to be worn in the hat. The subject was to be Hercules wrenching the lion's mouth. While I was working at this piece, Michael Angelo Buonarroti came oftentimes to see it. I had spent infinite pains upon the design, so that the attitude of the figure and the fierce passion of the beast were executed in quite a different style from that of any craftsman who had hitherto attempted such groups. This, together with the fact that the special branch of art was totally unknown to Michael Angelo, made the divine master give such praises to my work that I felt incredibly inspired for further effort. However, I found little else to do but jewel setting, and though I gained more thus than in any other way, yet I was dissatisfied, for I would fain have been employed upon some higher task than that of setting precious stones. Just then I met with Federigo Ginori, a young man of a very lofty spirit. He had lived some years in Naples, and being endowed with great charms of person and presence, had been the lover of a Neapolitan princess. He wanted to have a medal made, with Atlas bearing the world upon his shoulders, and applied to Michelangelo for a design. Michelangelo made this answer: "Go and find out a young goldsmith named Benvenuto; he will serve you admirably, and certainly he does not stand in need of sketches by me. However, to prevent your thinking that I want to save myself the trouble of so slight a matter, I will gladly sketch you something; but meanwhile speak to Benvenuto, and let him also make a model; he can then execute the better of the two designs." Federigo Ginori came to me, and told me what he wanted, adding thereto how Michelangelo had praised me, and how he had suggested I should make a waxen model, while he undertook to supply a sketch. The words of that great man so heartened me, that I set myself to work at once with eagerness upon the model; and when I had finished it, a painter who was intimate with Michelangelo, called Giuliano Bugiardini, brought me the drawing of Atlas. On the same occasion I showed Giuliano my little model in wax, which was very different from Michelangelo's drawing; and Federigo, in concert with Bugiardini, agreed that I should work upon my model. So I took it in hand, and when Michelangelo saw it, he praised me to the skies. This was a figure, as I have said, chiselled on a plate of gold; Atlas had the heaven upon his back, made out of a crystal ball, engraved with the zodiac upon a field of lapis lazuli. The whole composition produced an indescribably fine effect, and under it ran the legend Summa Tullis Juvat. Federigo was so thoroughly well pleased that he paid me very liberally. Al Luigi Alamanni was at that time in Florence. Federigo Ginori, who enjoyed his friendship, brought him often to my workshop, and through this introduction we became very intimate together.
Your saga may vary.